Jake Morrison wiped grease off his hands with a rag that had probably been white sometime during the previous century. He stared at the flickering neon sign outside his shop that read Morrison's Repairs in 3 different galactic languages, though the translator had clearly been drunk when programming the Zephyrian text because it currently advertised Morrison's emotional damage. Perfect. Just perfect. Another glorious day in paradise, Jake muttered, kicking a broken anti-grav generator across his cluttered workshop floor. The thing sparked and wheezed before finally giving up the ghost entirely. And there goes my deposit on that piece of garbage. Rust Bucket Prime wasn't exactly the vacation destination of the galaxy. In fact, if the galaxy had a septic tank, Rust Bucket Prime would be the stuff floating at the bottom. It was the kind of place where dreams came to die, and apparently where washed-up mechanics came to fix the dream's broken parts. Jake had been running his repair shop for 3 years now, ever since his discharge from the Terran Engineering Corps. Turns out telling your commanding officer that his brilliant tactical modifications were actually suicidal garbage wasn't career-enhancing behavior. Who knew? The shop's customer base consisted mainly of pirates with broken hyperdrive cores, smugglers with malfunctioning cloaking devices, and the occasional lost tourist, whose navigation system had suffered what Jake liked to call catastrophic stupidity failure. None of them paid particularly well, and most of them smelled like they'd been marinating in engine coolant for weeks. His latest customer had been a Glorb-Naxian trader, whose cargo hold had somehow become infested with space termites. The little metallic bugs had eaten through half his ship's hull before Jake managed to convince them that the trader's personality was far less appetizing than his starship. The Glorb-Naxian had paid in what he claimed was premium space currency, but turned out to be bottle caps from a soda brand that had gone extinct 2 centuries ago. Jake glanced at his bank account on his cracked tablet screen. The number staring back at him was so low it was practically underground. At this rate, he'd be eating nothing but recycled protein paste for the next month. Again. Maybe I should have stayed in the Corps, he said to himself, then immediately shook his head. No, definitely not. At least here nobody's shooting at me. As if the universe had heard him and decided to take it as a personal challenge, something large crashed into the dirt outside his shop. The impact shook his entire building and sent several precariously balanced spare parts tumbling from their shelves. Jake sighed deeply. I really need to stop talking to myself. It's giving the universe idea. Jake grabbed his plasma wrench and stepped outside, expecting to find the usual aftermath of another tourist's spectacular navigation failure. Instead, he found himself staring at what appeared to be a mountain of emerald green scales that was currently trying to untangle itself from the remains of his security fence. Oh, come on, Jake said. A dragon. Of course it's a dragon. Because my day wasn't weird enough already. The massive creature finally managed to extract itself from the twisted metal and turned in Jake's general direction. That's when Jake noticed 2 important things. First, this dragon was roughly the size of a small building, and second, its eyes were completely clouded over with what looked like scar tissue. Greetings, small human person, the dragon boomed in a voice that could probably be heard from orbit. I am Flameheart the Mighty, scourge of the Andromeda sector, terror of 1,000 worlds, and bane of the cosmic insurance industry. Jake blinked. Congratulations? I seek assistance with a matter of great importance. Flameheart continued, apparently not programmed for indoor voices. My vision has been taken from me in glorious battle, and I have heard tales of your legendary repair skills. Legendary. Jake looked around at his ramshackle shop, the broken fence, and the small fire that had started in his trash bin. Are we talking about the same guy? Because I'm pretty sure my Yelp reviews are mostly 1-star ratings and complaints about my attitude. Flameheart's massive head tilted in confusion. What is this Yelp you speak of? Is it some form of battle cry? Never mind. Jake rubbed his temples, feeling a headache coming on. Look, Mr. Flameheart the Mighty and moderately destructive. I fix machines. Starships, speeders, the occasional kitchen appliance when I'm really desperate for cash. I don't do medical procedures. You need a doctor, not a mechanic. But surely your legendary human ingenuity can devise a solution. Flameheart said, accidentally incinerating what was left of Jake's no refund sign with an enthusiastic puff of breath. The medics of my people have declared my condition untreatable. They say the damage to my optical organs is too severe for conventional healing. Jake watched his sign turn to ash and float away on the breeze. There went his legal protection against dissatisfied customers. Great, just great. And why exactly should I help you? What's in it for me besides probable third-degree burns and a dragon-sized hole in my insurance premiums? Flameheart reached into what Jake really hoped was some kind of interdimensional storage pouch, and produced a handful of gleaming crystals. I offer payment in rare draconian energy gems. each one worth enough to purchase a small moon. Jake's eyes widened despite himself. Those crystals were definitely worth more than his entire shop, his entire planet, and probably his entire self-esteem combined. Well, he said slowly, I suppose I could take a look at the problem. No promises though, and if I accidentally make things worse you can't eat me. That's non-negotiable. 20 minutes later, Jake found himself staring at the most ridiculous collection of spare parts he'd ever assembled. On his workbench sat a broken VR headset he'd salvaged from a crashed gaming rig, a tube of medical nanobots from his first aid kit that had probably expired sometime during the last ice age, and a glowing crystal he'd found in his junk drawer that he was pretty sure had fallen out of someone's engine last month. This is insane, Jake muttered, poking at the crystal with a screwdriver. I'm about to perform surgery with garbage and hope. This is either going to be the greatest miracle in medical history, or the most spectacular malpractice lawsuit in galactic jurisprudence. Flameheart, who had somehow managed to squeeze his massive bulk through Jake's shop door by the simple expedient of removing most of the door frame, watched with blind but hopeful attention. Your confidence fills me with great optimism, noble human. That wasn't confidence. That was panic, Jake replied, carefully wiring the nanobots into the VR headset's neural interface. There's a difference. Confidence would involve me knowing what I'm doing. This is just me hoping that 3 random pieces of technology will somehow decide to cooperate instead of exploding. The crystal was the real wild card. Jake had no idea what it actually did, but it was definitely some kind of alien tech and it glowed in a way that suggested either healing properties or imminent nuclear meltdown. In his experience, alien technology fell into exactly 2 categories: miraculous life-changing breakthrough, or spectacular fireworks display that left craters where buildings used to be. The nanobots are designed for basic tissue repair, Jake explained, mostly to himself since Flameheart probably didn't understand half the technical terms anyway. The VR headset can interface directly with optical nerves if I reroute the sensory input, and this crystal thing is either going to supercharge the whole system, or turn us both into radioactive dust. I have complete faith in your abilities, Flameheart declared. Well, one of us should, Jake said, making the final connection between the crystal and the headset's power supply. The whole contraption immediately started humming with an energy that made his teeth itch. Okay, moment of truth. Try not to incinerate me if this goes horribly wrong. He carefully placed the jury-rigged visor over Flameheart's massive eyes. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the crystal's glow intensified, the nanobots activated with a soft whirring sound, and the VR headset's display panels flickered to life. Flameheart's entire body went rigid. Then he let out a roar that shattered every piece of glass within a 3-block radius. I can see, the dragon bellowed, tears streaming down his scaly cheeks. By the eternal flames of my ancestors, I can see the colors, the beauty, the magnificent clutter of your disorganized workshop. Jake looked around at his admittedly chaotic workspace and shrugged. Yeah, well, don't get too excited, it's not much to look at. But Flameheart was already bowing his massive head, which in the confines of the shop meant accidentally knocking over a shelf of spare parts. Noble Jake Morrison, you have restored not just my sight but my very soul. I am forever in your debt. You shall be sung about in the great halls of my people for 10,000 years. Great, Jake said flatly. Just what I always wanted. Immortal fame and a cleanup bill. 4 days later, Jake was enjoying what had become his new routine of counting draconian energy gems while eating something that wasn't recycled protein paste, when the sky suddenly went dark. Not regular nighttime dark, but the kind of dark that happens when something really big blocks out the sun. He stepped outside and immediately regretted every life choice that had led him to this moment. 4 massive starships hung in the sky above Rust Bucket Prime like angry metal thunderclouds. Each one was roughly the size of a small city and bristling with enough weapons to turn the entire planet into a commemorative asteroid belt. They were clearly draconian vessels, all sleek curves and predatory angles, designed by someone who thought regular spaceships weren't nearly intimidating enough. Oh, fantastic, Jake muttered. I fix one dragon's vision problems and now the entire Space Navy shows up. This is exactly why I don't do charity work. The lead ship's communication array crackled to life, broadcasting a voice that could probably be heard on 3 neighboring star systems. Attention, primitive backwater planet. This is Admiral Scalewrath of the Draconian Imperial Fleet. We demand the immediate surrender of the criminal who has interfered with Prince Flameheart. Jake blinked. Prince? Prince? That overgrown lizard is royalty. He looked around frantically, as if hoping to find someone else to blame for this catastrophic misunderstanding. Nobody mentioned anything about princes. I thought he was just some random dragon with vision problems and a flair for dramatic introductions. The ships began descending, their massive hulls casting shadows that turned day into an ominous twilight. Other residents of Rust Bucket Prime were starting to emerge from their homes and businesses, most of them pointing at the sky and having what appeared to be very animated discussions about whether now would be a good time to update their life insurance policies. A brilliant column of light erupted from the lead ship, depositing what could only be described as the most intimidating military parade Jake had ever seen directly in front of his shop. Admiral Scalewrath was even bigger than Flameheart, with dark red scales that looked like they'd been polished with the blood of his enemies. He was flanked by a dozen dragon warriors in ceremonial armor that probably cost more than Jake's entire planet's gross domestic product. "I am Admiral Scalewrath," the massive dragon announced, as if the fleet of city-sized warships hadn't already made that fairly obvious. "Supreme Commander of the Imperial Navy and uncle to Prince Flameheart the Mighty. Where is the scoundrel who dared lay hands upon the heir to the dragon throne?" Jake slowly raised his hand like a student admitting he'd forgotten his homework. "That would be me, and in my defense, nobody told me he was a prince. Also, in my further defense, I actually helped him. The whole vision thing, fixed. You're welcome." Admiral Scalewrath's eyes narrowed to slits that still managed to be roughly the size of dinner plates. "You helped him? Yeah, weird concept. I know," Jake said, his survival instincts clearly having abandoned him sometime around the second cup of coffee that morning. "Some guy shows up with a medical problem, I fix it. He pays me, everyone's happy. It's called customer service. You might want to look into it." At that moment, Flameheart himself emerged from the lead ship, moving with the confident stride of someone who could actually see where he was going. The jury-rigged visor Jake had built was still firmly attached to his head, its crystal components glowing softly in the artificial twilight. "Uncle Scalewrath," Flameheart boomed cheerfully, "meet Jake Morrison, the miracle worker who restored my sight. Isn't he magnificent?" Admiral Scalewrath looked back and forth between his nephew and the grease-stained human standing in front of a repair shop that was held together mostly by rust and wishful thinking. His expression suggested he was trying to reconcile the concept of miracle worker with the reality of guy who apparently uses duct tape as a primary building material. The silence stretched out long enough for Jake to seriously consider whether his last words should be an apology or a sarcastic observation about dragon family dynamics. Admiral Scalewrath's massive head swiveled between Jake and Prince Flameheart several times like a very large, very dangerous metronome. Finally, he spoke in a voice that sounded like a controlled avalanche. "You are telling me," the Admiral said slowly, "that this human successfully treated the prince's battle injuries, when the finest medical minds in the Draconian Empire declared them incurable." "That's exactly what I'm telling you," Flameheart said, practically bouncing with excitement, which was a terrifying sight given his size. "Uncle, he's a genius. He took broken pieces of primitive technology and somehow created a healing device that surpasses anything our scientists have ever developed." Jake felt the blood drain from his face. "Whoa. Hold on there, Sparky. Let's not get carried away. I didn't cure cancer or anything. I just jury-rigged some spare parts together and got lucky. Really, really lucky. Like lottery winning, lightning strike, finding a parking spot at the mall during Christmas lucky." Admiral Scalewrath's expression shifted from suspicion to something that looked dangerously like respect. Modesty in the face of achievement. A noble trait. He turned to address his soldiers. "Prepare the ceremonial honors. We have found ourselves a true hero." "No. No." Jake waved his hands frantically. "There's been a huge misunderstanding here. I'm not a hero. I'm barely even a competent mechanic. Ask anyone who's ever brought me their broken toaster." But the dragon warriors were already moving with military precision, unloading what appeared to be enough ceremonial equipment to outfit a small parade. Golden banners unfurled, trumpets that looked like they could double as siege weapons emerged from storage crates, and someone was setting up what Jake really hoped wasn't a sacrificial altar. According to Imperial law, Admiral Scalewrath announced, "Any individual who performs a service of extraordinary value to the royal family must be rewarded appropriately. Jake Morrison of Rust Bucket Prime, I hereby offer you the position of Royal Engineer to the Draconian Empire, with all the honors, responsibilities and extremely generous pension plan that entails." Jake's eye twitched. "Royal Engineer? I don't even have a proper engineering degree. I got kicked out of technical school for building a coffee machine that achieved sentience and immediately filed a complaint with the labor board. Your unconventional methods are precisely what make you valuable," Flameheart said, beaming with pride that was frankly disturbing given that they'd known each other for less than a week. "Uncle, he didn't just fix my eyes. He gave me hope when everyone else said there was no. That's not just engineering, that's magic." "It's not magic," Jake protested. "It's desperation and a complete disregard for safety protocols. There's a difference." Admiral Scalewrath nodded approvingly. The humility of a true master. "Tell me, Jake Morrison, what would you require to accept this position?" A private laboratory. A team of research assistants. Your own moon. My own what now? Jake's voice cracked slightly. Listen, Admiral Scaly. Scalewrath. I appreciate the offer. I really do, but I'm just a guy who fixes things. I don't do politics. I don't do ceremonies. I definitely don't do anything that involves wearing fancy uniforms or remembering people's titles. But you must accept. Flameheart said, looking genuinely distressed. The Empire needs minds like yours. Think of all the good you could do. All the problems you could solve. Jake looked around at the assembled dragon warriors. The ceremonial banners, and the growing crowd of Rustbucket Prime residents, who were starting to gather at what they probably assumed was a safe distance. His entire life had just been turned upside down by one act of basic customer service. And now he was being offered a job that would probably come with its own fleet of spaceships and a dental plan that covered planets. Can I think about it? He asked weakly. Of course, Admiral Scalewrath boomed. Take all the time you need. We'll just wait here with our 4 warships and several thousand crew members while you make your decision. No pressure at all. Jake looked up at the massive vessels blocking out the sun and sighed. Yeah, no pressure. None whatsoever. 3 hours later, Jake found himself standing on a platform that had definitely not been there that morning, wearing what the dragons assured him was casual ceremonial attire, but looked suspiciously like a golden straitjacket with delusions of grandeur. The entire population of Rustbucket Prime had gathered to watch what Admiral Scalewrath kept calling the historic elevation of a galactic hero, while Jake mentally composed his resignation letter to the universe. Citizens of this humble world, Admiral Scalewrath's voice boomed across the makeshift ceremony ground, where dragon warriors had somehow managed to construct what appeared to be a small amphitheater, in the time it had taken Jake to figure out how to put on his ridiculous outfit. Today we witness the recognition of true genius, Jake Morrison, the humble mechanic who achieved what our greatest minds could not. The crowd cheered, though Jake suspected it was mostly because 4 city-sized warships hovering overhead tended to encourage enthusiasm. Someone in the back was holding up a sign that read Morrison's Repairs, now with 100% more royalty, which Jake was pretty sure violated several trademark laws. I still think this is a massive overreaction, Jake muttered into what he hoped was a private microphone, but was almost certainly being broadcast across 3 star systems. I mean, come on, all I did was slap together some spare parts and hope they didn't explode. That's not genius. That's just Tuesday. Prince Flameheart, who had insisted on personally presenting Jake with his honors, stepped forward carrying a crystalline plaque that was probably worth more than Jake's childhood home. Jake Morrison, he announced formally, for services to the Draconian Empire above and beyond the call of duty, I present you with the Order of the Golden Wrench, First Class, with special commendation for creative problem-solving and an unprecedented lack of regard for conventional wisdom. The Order of the Golden Wrench? Jake stared at the ornate award, which did indeed feature a wrench, though it was made of some kind of metal that seemed to bend light around itself. You guys made up an award specifically for me. We had to, Admiral Scalewrath explained proudly. None of our existing honors seemed appropriate for someone who performs miracles using what our engineers describe as advanced technical nonsense. Jake accepted the plaque with the kind of grace usually reserved for accepting a terminal diagnosis. This is surreal. A week ago my biggest accomplishment was fixing a broken coffee maker without electrocuting myself. Now I'm apparently some kind of galactic hero because I helped one customer with his vision problems. But that is precisely what makes you remarkable. Flameheart said it, his eyes literally sparkling behind Jake's jury-rigged visor. You saw a problem that couldn't be solved, and you solved it anyway. You looked at impossible odds and said, yeah, whatever. Let me grab my toolbox. The ceremony continued with increasingly elaborate speeches about Jake's revolutionary approach to biomedical engineering and his inspiring dedication to customer satisfaction. Several dragon dignitaries took turns explaining how Jake's work would change the course of galactic medicine, while Jake stood there wondering if it was too late to fake his own death and assume a new identity on a planet where nobody had ever heard of dragon. The final speaker was an elderly dragon scientist who had apparently flown in specifically for this ceremony. In my 3 centuries of medical research, she declared, I have never seen such elegant simplicity. This human took a medical scanner, healing nanobots, and an energy crystal, and combined them in a way that completely bypasses our understanding of how any of those things actually work. It's either pure genius or pure madness. I vote for madness, Jake said under his breath. What was that? Admiral Scalewrath asked. I said it was probably luck, Jake replied quickly. Ah, the modesty of a true master. As the ceremony finally wound down and the dragons began preparing for departure, Jake realized that his life had fundamentally changed in ways he was still trying to comprehend. His repair shop now had a 5-star rating on every review platform in known space. He had enough draconian energy gems to buy his own planet, and he was apparently on the short list for Galactic Person of the Year. Prince Flameheart approached him one last time as the crowd began to disperse. "Jake, my friend, you have given me a gift beyond measure. If you ever need anything at all, you need only call." Jake looked around at the chaos his simple act of customer service had created. Dragons were packing up ceremonial equipment, his neighbors were taking selfies with alien technology, and someone was already setting up a souvenir stand to sell "I witnessed a miracle at Morrison's Repairs" t-shirts. "You know what I need," Jake said finally. "I need to fix Miss Henderson's toaster. She's been waiting 3 weeks, and now I'm apparently too busy being a galactic hero to do my actual job." Flameheart laughed, a sound like distant thunder mixed with joy. "My friend, you are truly unique in all the galaxy." Jake watched the Dragon Prince walk away, then looked down at his golden award, then up at the departing warships, then over at the line of customers that had somehow formed outside his shop while he wasn't looking. "Well," he said to himself, "at least business is picking up." And somewhere in the cosmic distance, the universe chuckled at its own joke. Sometimes the biggest adventures start with the smallest acts of kindness, and sometimes helping one customer see clearly is enough to change everything. Even if that customer happens to be a blind dragon prince with a flair for the dramatic and a complete inability to mention important details like his royal status, until after the fact. Jake Morrison shook his head, tucked his award under his arm, and walked back into his shop to fix Mrs. Henderson's toaster. After all, some things were more important than galactic fame, like making sure the toast came out evenly brown.